Welcome everyone. My name is Brian McDougall, and I won't be one of the speakers today, but I'll be just doing a little intro here before I turn things over to Diana. We're delighted to have you online with us for this first meeting, first online meeting organized by the Huichol Scholarship Fund. Normally at this time of year, we would be holding in-person meetings at the International Friendship Club in Puerto Vallarta, which is where many of our donors and sponsors are located. But for obvious reasons, this year we're online instead. So today we're going to have two speakers. We're going to talk about the Huichol struggle for autonomy during the age of COVID-19. And those two speakers are Diana Negrín and María Cruz. And both of them play critical roles in the Huichol Scholarship Fund, in addition to being university teachers and experts on all things related to the Huichol. So before I turn it over to Diana and María, I want to just thank some of the organizations that have helped to make today's online session possible. So first and foremost is the International Friendship Club and also the Wixarika Research Center. And I should point out now that the Huichol Scholarship Fund is an arm of the Wixarika Research Center. And then in addition to that, two of the other partners that are behind the Huichol Scholarship Fund are the Volcanes Community Education Project in Puerto Vallarta and the Rotary Sur Vallarta. So those are important organizations as well. And again, I want to also point out that in 2 weeks' time, we'll be having another online session, and this one promises to be extremely exciting because two of the students who have been beneficiaries of our scholarship program and your support and your donations will be joining us for the call. And they'll be talking about their experience as Huichol University students, their experience with the Scholarship Fund, and then we'll be talking a little bit about how the Scholarship Fund operates and why we think you should be supporting it. So that's in 2 weeks' time. The details are in the emails that I've sent out previously, but I will send you a reminder and an update in the next week or so. And then finally, before I turn it over to Diana, I want to just point out that if at any point you have questions about the Huichol Scholarship Fund, how we operate, what we do, and so on, feel free to contact me. And my email address is on all the emails you get from us. In addition, if you haven't already been to the Wixarika Research Center website, you should check that out. And while you're on that website, you'll see that there's a button for donations. And that is now the way in which you can donate to the Huichol Scholarship Fund. When you make a donation there through PayPal, it gives you the opportunity to make comments about your donation, and you can simply specify that the donation is for the Scholarship Fund and that money will go to us. So with all of that behind us, I want to turn it over to Diana and María, and they'll take it from here. Go ahead, Diana.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Brian. Thank you, everybody who's here. I'm so happy to see so many people actually on this Friday afternoon. And of course, I hope some of you are maybe enjoying Mexico, but if not, I hope that you're enjoying whatever coordinate that you're at and that you're all in good health, despite, I think, what has been such a long year for everybody. And hopefully we're on our way out. And certainly the topic today that María and I are going to be discussing with you all is a little bit about Huichol or Wixarika culture, our relationship to the work that we've been doing with the Huichol Research Center, and context to how COVID is actually affecting Wixarika or Huichol communities in the highlands of Jalisco, but also those who are living in the cities. And so that is certainly something that's affecting most, if not all, of our students at this particular moment. It's affected them all because they're all virtually learning, but it's also affected many of them personally. We're going to start, I guess, with María introducing herself a little bit more. Just to give you a little quick introduction to María. María Elena Cruz is a descendant of the Huicharitari. She was born in California. She's the first person in her family to graduate from college and the first to receive a PhD. She is a social cultural anthropologist specializing in Indigenous and Mexican American oral history. She teaches Mexican American studies at San Jose State University here in the Bay Area, and is director of the Aspire McNair Scholars Program, which helps first generation low income and underrepresented students develop undergraduate research and continue to graduate programs. María is part of the team that reviews student applications for the Huichol Scholarship Fund each year, and she's a member of the Wixarika Research Center's board, and also a dear friend and colleague who I've had the pleasure to know now for quite a long time. So,
yes.
María, welcome, welcome.
Thank you, Diana. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, everybody, for being here and in support of our Wixarika students and the Wixarika community. I'm so grateful to be here. One of my passions is to help first generation low income underrepresented students. As I do, that is a big part of what I do at San Jose State, along with teaching. I was also, of course, first generation low income and underrepresented, of course. I am affiliated with the Huichol Wixarika, of course, because my family is from the town of Huichol, Alto Jalisco, and I don't know if you're familiar with that space, but my family is from the Diana Negrín and her father called, El Gran Nayar, right? So in that space, my family has been there for generations, dating back to the 1700s. I was able to date my fifth great grandpa to the 1700s, thankfully, to the oral stories of my grandmother, oral history, oral tradition. That is the reason why I love oral history and oral tradition. And also, cooperating with archives, we found that, our family is indigenous heritage and indigenous ancestry, and it is most likely Wixarika, because that is Wixarika, was Wixarika land, still is in some ways. My dissertation was on oral histories and traditions, like Diana said, and I looked at the Wixarika artists and non-artists who traveled from the Sierra Madre and who traveled to Huichol, Alto Jalisco, and had lived in Alto Jalisco, and who traveled to spaces like Guadalajara and Zacatecas to sell their art, right? And so my connection to the Huichol Research Center stems from my work. I have supported the efforts of this organization for more than 14 years. I couldn't believe it. I was like, wow, it's been 14 years that I have been part of this wonderful organization. I met Juan Negrín. I was very fortunate to meet him 15, 16 years ago, and travel with him a little bit in Zacatecas and meet up there. So I'm a big admirer of Juan Negrín's work as well as Diana. COVID, we are all experiencing COVID, right? And I think this pandemic is teaching us a lot right now about what we can do and to help others and to help communities with need, right? Even here at San Jose, I don't know if you're familiar with San Jose, but we are in the Silicon Valley, very expensive to live here. And my students, are struggling with COVID. And so I have firsthand accounts for first generation students here. And I know Diana's going to talk a little bit more about the first generation students that are struggling with COVID in Greater Jalisco, right? Or in the area of Mexico, Guadalajara, or maybe Zacatecas and that kind of sense. So I thank you for the introduction. And so, yeah, it's a little bit about what I do and I'm doing. And I'm just happy to be here and to promote, you know, the support for first generation Wixarika students, right, who really do need our support, especially right now.
Thank you so much, Maria. And thank you for your ongoing contributions to the work that we've been doing. So, you know, many of you might already be familiar a little bit with Wixarika or Huichol culture. Some of you may not be so much. But I'm going to share my screen just briefly and just to give you guys a sense of the map and the territory that Maria was just talking about. And then I'll do a little introducing of myself. So hopefully you all see the screen right now. But this is actually this God's eye. Some of you also may be familiar, particularly from your experience in Puerto Vallarta, seeing this symbol that's very central to Wixarika or Huichol kind of aesthetics, but it's because it represents these 5 sacred points that are their territory. This is, you know, Puerto Vallarta is just around here, right? Just south of San Blas. And the highland communities are mostly up in this region. And then they have sacred regions all the way down to Guadalajara, to Wirikuta and San Luis Potosí, and then up north in Durango. So, you know, there's 5 sacred points, 5 colors of corn, and that's really this central symbol to the God's eye. And I just wanted to share that just to give you all a little bit of context of that territory, because one of the things that is oftentimes difficult for people to understand when it comes to Indigenous territory is that it doesn't map onto the exact boundaries that the colonial period put into place. And so there've always been these struggles over these places, some which were able to be maintained across generations and others which were expropriated. And in some cases, right, you all are familiar with that coastal area, which is a sacred place of pilgrimage since time immemorial. And so in Jaramara, which is by San Blas, right, just north of Vallarta, there is ongoing struggles over kind of the expansion of the tourist industry, of resorts, and the way it encroaches on some of these sacred lands. So the Huichol Research Center that I am a part of was founded by my parents, Ivan and Juan Negrín. Juan Negrín began working in 1970 with Wixarika or Huichol artists. And soon after they began, my parents began to travel with the families of artists into the traditional communities and essentially to establish really close bonds that had to do both with helping better promote their artwork, which, as you all might be familiar with, also falls into this spectrum of inequalities and you know, people trying to make a livelihood. And it was like that back in the 70s as well. But it also got them involved in other projects to help protect the forests, to help promote sustainable development projects. And then in the early 2000s, once they had relocated to California, they established the Wixarika Research Center to bring together and help consolidate, you know, more than, you know, essentially 4 decades of work with communities. And a great deal of it has, you know, are these treasures that were collected in artwork at a point when much of the development issues that we have today hadn't really kind of taken a foot, you know, in terms of some of the things that make young people migrate today and make them aspire to higher education. So I was born into this, and I wound up doing my PhD research on the activism of Wixarika University students in Guadalajara and Tepic, which are 2 of the centers where you see most of the students going to achieve higher education. And I spent several years working with different student collectives to see the work that they were doing to really expand scholarship opportunities, spaces, better relationships with non-Indigenous students, and kind of mutual support. And I wound up writing my first book on that. I can send along a link at a certain point. I'll put it in the chat, with the University of Arizona Press that really tries to understand how this particular generation of young indigenous urban residents are negotiating with a whole history of colonial relationships and with these new paths that they are taking in studying things as diverse as law and forestry. So it's really, really lovely to have a chance to work with this scholarship fund because it's very dear to the research I do. Obviously, you know, a good deal of our colleagues of the Huichol that collaborate with the Wixarika Research Center are young people who have struggled and who have laid kind of the path for this other generation that now we are collectively trying to help support, even if it's in a modest way. One of the things that our students consistently tell us is that even if it's not a lot of money, it provides them a sense of security. It provides them inspiration to know that other people are recognizing their work and their hardships and are willing, right, as strangers to help them reach their goal. So that is the work that I do. I help run the board of directors of the Huichol Research Center, and I think that's a good chunk to say for now, because I'd love to take any questions and answers. And I know Maria is going to speak a little bit more about COVID and kind of the impacts of COVID. And then I'll speak more about what some of our scholarship recipients are actually doing currently.
Thank you, Elena. One of the things that I have to say, well, one of the things that I, in my research that I found was I studied, since I was looking at the Wixarika art and artists that travel from, you know, Huichol, Alto Jalisco to Guadalajara to Zacatecas to sell their art, was the economics. I was really forced to look at economics in that space and in that area. And in Huichol, Alto Jalisco, I found that it was one of the poorest economically spaces of all of Mexico, right? And it's ironic because it's an area where Mestizo and Wixarika population live, right? And ironically, that area is where the mining, much mining and extraction of millions of dollars has come from, which is so just juxtaposed position, right? It's just these millions of dollars have come from the space, but yet you have the poorest of the poor there, and they're both Wixarika and Mestizo, right, population. What's one of the things that I found that was really heartbreaking and interesting at the same time, right? It's like, whoa, we've got millions of dollars coming out from the space, but yet you have the poorest populations of all of Mexico in that space. And so I think about COVID, right? Right now we are all going through COVID. A lot of my family members have gone through COVID. I have had my bout with COVID recently, and I had mild symptoms, and just going through that in a personal level myself, having mild symptoms is not like the flu. Many people think, oh, it's like the flu. No, it's not. I still have residual, the residual of having COVID. Like I still can't smell quite right, and I still have, my taste buds are off. But the pain that I had while I had COVID was horrible, like on my joints and my body, and everybody's affected differently, right? And so one of the things that I thought of was like, you know what, I am fortunate enough that I am able to go to the store and buy some kind of medication to ease this pain, right? And I thought about the Wixarika students, and I think about my students, my SJSU students, right, who don't have that luxury or don't have the means to just say, hey, I need this for today, right? I need to ease this pain, or I need to help my family member in this way so that they can make it through that another day, right? So I think about these students, and I think you know, any little bit helps, because as a student, you're every day you're thinking about what I have to do next, right? And every day is a new day. And so if you have COVID, the littlest things can help, right? Especially if you have a little bit of funds. And I know I contributed to some of these students that we couldn't, that the organizations couldn't fund here. I said to Deanna, you know what, I need to help in any way I can, because I know what it's like to be a poor student. I know what it's like to live day to day and not know whether I should choose to buy food or medicine, right? Or can I buy this? Right now, everybody's trying to pay for internet as well, right? That's another huge expense anywhere for any student right now. I don't care how much it costs, it is an expense. and to get to be online and to be in school is also part of, I think, the economics or the lack of economics, right, that some of our students have here in the United States. We're lucky here in the United States that we have financial aid, right? In Mexico, students do not have financial aid. They don't have that extra layer of like protection. And even here, when I had financial aid, I still felt I was like struggling. And so I imagine the Wixarika students, and I know they're gonna speak to their own experience with this. I'm sure the next time they come to talk with some of the students about how they're affected. But I know for a fact that many of our Wixarika students are struggling on the day-to-day of just like, will my family be able to survive, right? How are they going to survive? And how am I going to have this mental capacity to help them as well as help myself, get through school and get through these days of trying to finish what I have to finish and reach that goal of being the first to not just give to themselves, right, but to their communities, their families, and so forth. And so, yeah, that's something I really wanted to mention in regards to just on the personal level, that I feel grateful that I can buy medicine over the counter and I could help family members in some way, somehow, right? And having that support around us was tremendous. So I think that our Wixarika students really, really do need that at this moment, more so than any other moment, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And in actually the last couple of weeks, there's been a very strong outbreak. And when you look at the COVID map of Mexico, the northern area of Jalisco, I'll share my screen again, has been one of the hardest hit. So if you guys are familiar with the map of Jalisco, it's these fingers, that's the northern region of the state. And that is where we've had some of the biggest outbreaks as of recently, and particularly in the community of San Sebastian or Huautla. This is a picture that one of our students recently posted, actually, just waiting for the community bus. So, there's everyday struggles like just leaving and coming, right? Most people don't have private transportation. And so they do rely on the community bus. They rely on the community ambulance to get rushed out to the nearby clinic. And it's been definitely a struggle with to be able to follow these protocols, right? Because these are small buses that usually only leave once a day. And so usually they're quite crowded. And one of the things that's happened, obviously, with COVID is, as Maria was mentioning, right, the arts and crafts circuit is an incredibly important source of income for many families. In fact, Brian and I have seen that several of our students support themselves partially with the sale of artwork, whether it's in, going seasonally to Puerto Vallarta or Los Cabos, or, just being able to sell in these public festivals, right, that have all been disappeared because of the pandemic. So certainly there have been many efforts to try to move some of these things digitally, right, to make online sales. There are non-Indigenous allies who have tried to promote the beadwork of their friends. But all of this, as Maria points out, can take time, and it's not always available at the moment. And over the last couple of months, we at the Huichol Research Center have had to do kind of emergency support for some of our friends and our colleagues down in Mexico, right? So, sending money from everything from medicine to burial, to help with burials. And so there's definitely the Wixarika, many Indigenous communities have been particularly hard hit. I don't know about Canada, but certainly in the United States and across Latin America, Indigenous communities have been very affected. And it's very sad that in the last few weeks, we've seen a spike in cases. Our student, Tanima Enriquez, who will speak on February 19th, she comes from one of the communities that has been most severely impacted. So this takes an economic toll on the families, and it obviously takes an emotional toll on them. And I know that students are trying really hard to just focus. As a university professor, I too, I'm seeing many of my students have a harder time focusing and doing their work. I wanted to, before I take off this I just had a couple images. This is our recent, one of our recent graduates, Herminio. He's our first, he was in the first cohort and he just graduated in December. And I just wanted to speak a little bit about him and the work that he's doing. He studied law, but now he got a full-time job at the Secretary of Public Health. It's called the Secretaría de Bienestar. And I spoke with him night before last because his big task right now is COVID public outreach. So he's traveling to all of the communities, speaking specifically with senior citizens, informing them about the vaccine so that they're not scared about the vaccine. He says there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of confusion about symptoms. So he's, this first round is going out, taking antibacterial gels and face masks, and then signing people up for the vaccine. And then the vaccine is going to start to be given out in March in the communities. And we hope that will make a difference. But, he mentioned how it's very, very difficult for people to follow protocol, and that there is a lot of confusion. And I think similarly, I don't know about Canada, but in the United States and Mexico, there was a lot of confusion from the federal government down, mixed signals about mask use and about really enforcing protocols. And what we've seen in both countries is that it's had very bad effects, right? It's no surprise that the countries that have been hardest hit by this disease were countries whose leadership was denied much of it and struggled to really put into place protocols. And so the way that we see this reflected in the communities is expanded, right? Because we're talking about tighter knit, and as Maria said, communities that are already struggling economically. And so this just really adds a lot more weight, in terms of people saying, okay, I just need to leave my community to be able to make ends meet. Even if it means getting under, being exposed to the disease on the bus. Maria, I don't know if there's anything that you would like to add, or if there are any questions that people have.
Yeah, I forgot to add that, we remember our friend Casimiro and Luciano who they come to the United States with art, right, from the artists we know, to sell the art. They're not able to do that right now either. So that's a huge loss of income for these various communities, right? They usually bring a lot different art from the various communities in their spaces, and to sell them here at powwows and to sell them here at different events. And they're not able to do that because, of course, there's no events, right, happening here. I particularly support the powwow here at Stanford. It's really close to my house. But when Luciano comes, I'm always helping him to figure out where, his stand, his space, and all that kind of stuff. And we haven't done that when he's not able to do that, so that the community can get that extra support, right, of funding or help or monies, right? And that goes back to all the young scholars that are doing both, right, trying to get education and also trying to make a living by creating either beaded art or various types of art, right, that come from those spaces. So I forgot to mention that, but I wanted to mention that.
Yeah, thank you. And I wanted to share my screen again with you all so that you could just see a little bit of the work that, a little bit of the work that our students are doing. Sorry, I'm having a little technical issue finding my page. Sorry, let's see if it works now. Okay, you all should be able to see. So in the network, one of the things that's really wonderful about this new generation of Huichol students is that they are incredibly adept, obviously, in social media. And so we've really been able to see a lot of potential in the way in which they can help spread messages, right? Their ability to take a lot of the information that could be valuable from the city, from the media, and take it to their communities. And so one of the things that we did was this video that's a young doctor. She just finished studying medicine at the University of Guadalajara a couple of years ago, and she is now working as a doctor. She's her mother was the first Western educated Wixarika doctor, and now she's second generation. And this is just so you can get a sense of, this is, if you're not familiar with the Wixarika, language.
Hey watu aputame hasuni tapate eriaka kename kuini ya muku ka uyeika kename teiwari ruapini reigati huku pero no reta kia kariri hie patu na puku ma video.
Just to give you a sense of some of the valuable, the really valuable work that these young folks can do. And before I open it up for questions and answers, I just wanted to take you all to the Huichol Research Center website and online archive, where you'll be able to not only learn a little bit more about Wixarika art. We have a whole section on art that we're looking to expand. We have a section of archives that has stuff on history and culture. Can you all see the page? Yeah? Okay. And then under projects, you'll be able to see the scholarship fund. And one of the things that we've been able to add recently are some of the stories about some of the students that we've funded. And I know some of you have actually seen this already. This is Xochitl Chanes. And it's them speaking a little bit about themselves, their work. One of the people that you'll meet in 2 weeks, if you can make it, is Bianca or Tanima America, who is working for the Commission on Human Rights, and she studied law. And of course, in order to make a tax-deductible donation, if you're here in the United States, if you pay taxes in the United States, regardless, you can donate by clicking donate, right? And you can do PayPal, you can do Visa, MasterCard. One of the things that you may also be interested in doing, right, there it'll take you, is if you can make a one-time donation, or you can make ongoing, right, a monthly payment. And that's something that we find to be very useful. It can be something very modest, but it would greatly help kind of create this sustainability, right, of the fund as we move forward. And as Brian said, when you make the donation, when it says add special instructions, you can give instructions that this is for the Huichol Scholarship Fund, and we will send you a receipt. And of course, as I said, if you pay taxes in the United States, you will get a tax-deductible receipt from us. Are there any questions? Brian, Maria, am I missing anything?
No, every little bit helps. I mean, anything anybody can give will help a student here for sure.
I should just point out for the Canadians who are online that we are still working with some folks, especially in Rotary, to try to establish a tax-exempt donation channel for Canadians. So hopefully within the next couple of months, we'll have an announcement about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think one of the things that we're also working towards is that now that we've funded now 3 years in a row. So we have 3 cohorts, some who have already graduated, some who will graduate this year. But, Maria and I were discussing, both of us have been parts of fellowship programs. Both of us were able to get our higher education because of scholarships and fellowships. And many of these fellowships become also communities, right? I was a Ford fellow. And so to this day, I'm able to, through a listserv and through yearly conferences, I'm able to connect with people that helped me when I was a student, but that also can help me in the career process. And so I've spoken with a couple of students about that, and we're hoping to begin our first meeting in March where we can get all of the generations to be able to meet virtually. That's one of the strange positive outcomes of this pandemic, is that we've all kind of learned that we can at least still talk, even if we're super far away.
Yes, definitely. There's no way I would have made it an undergrad or graduate school without some of these fellowships, small little scholarships that I applied to, and then big ones, right? There's just no way. I don't know how I would have made it. And I think that's what makes me think about, first generation in Mexico. It's 10 times harder to do it there without the financial aid, period, right? Yeah, so I'm so happy to be part of this organization, and I can't wait to see all the alum come together and network, as you said, because that's a huge plus for them, to continue on to their careers and help each other.
Mm-hmm. Does anybody have a question or a comment?
How many students do you have requiring aid in the fund?
Well, currently, what's our number, Brian? I'm so bad with that. It's, I'd have to look at my Excel really quickly.
So currently we're supporting 16 students this year. This is our third year of operation. The first year we started with 6 students. So we've been expanding, but each year when the time comes for new applicants to do the paperwork and let us know they're interested, we discover that, of course, there are many more students who would meet our criteria for support, but we simply don't have the funds to support all of them.
Mm-hmm.
So we're still unaware of how many potential students there are out there, but we know there's many more than we're able to support at this point in time.
Yeah.
So.
And I think one of the things that's also valuable about this scholarship is that our commitment is to support them each year until they finish, right? So in some instances, we'll get somebody that's in their final year, like I think it was in this last year, single mom, she just needed to get help through her last year, right? And in other instances, we have students that are coming on their second year. We want to make sure that they've completed their first year. And I think it's nice for them to know that from one year to the next, they can count on this as long as that they're still registered and enrolled. And this last year, it gave them peace of mind with the pandemic to know that, they could count on paying their internet or upgrade their technology, because that's really kind of the most essential thing right now for a student to be able to make it. And they also have to travel, and most of them, interestingly, I found out, are actually back at home in their ranches, because internet now is much more widely available, and it's available in communities that a year ago didn't have it. And so it's been interesting to see, most of our students have gone back to their extended ranch communities, and sometimes they can't log on because sometimes the internet falls, but it's providing them a different opportunity. And I think that's going to be something that, rather than think about all of this last year as loss and, kind of something that's taken students off track, I think it's given students new opportunities that hopefully we can really use, because usually these students would be, hours and hours and hours away from their families. And so it's a different type of experience for them this year.
Did you say most were attending school in the States or Guadalajara?
No, our students right now it's pretty diverse. Most of them are between Nayarit and Guadalajara. We have one student who's at the Chapingo University outside of Mexico City, which is kind of the most well-regarded school that deals with anything that has to do with forestry, agroecology. He's studying forestry. But most of our students usually are in Nayarit and Jalisco.
It might be helpful for people to hear a little bit about the particular challenges that a student will face, not only leaving their communities, but leaving perhaps their culture. Maybe there isn't another student they can share their native language with. So I don't know if that would be some of the background on what is life like for some of these students when they actually leave for school, what a huge step that can be for them.
Maria, do you want to speak to that at all?
I know that the transition for any person who is first generation is already difficult. And so you add culture, you add racism, you add that kind of attention in Mexico, which is blatant in Mexico, right? Indigenous peoples have been, it's just been known that they have to deal with that as well as another layer, right? And so those are huge transitions and psychological, social, emotional feelings that they must deal with, right? So I think that a lot of our students have gone through that, right? And still go through that. It's not like, they don't go through some of these injustices, right, in these spaces.
Yeah, and I think it's one of the things that that I've seen in my work is that there's always an aspiration to give back to the community, and sometimes students might feel really caught, right, that they don't belong in one or the other, or that there are really high expectations of them when they go back home and they graduated, and as Maria said, that discrimination will continue when they're looking at applying for jobs. They may not be able to attain that social mobility that they had thought of, right? It's hard for all of us right now. I think I'm part of that generation also, that you get higher education and you see that there isn't necessarily that much opportunity. So when you add that kind of structural and kind of everyday forms of discrimination, I think that's one of the things that they've dealt with quite a lot. On the other hand, I think that there have been some really important gains in the last few years in Mexico. And I think a lot of it has to do with young people like the ones who we're supporting that are, getting jobs in places where it used to be just a bureaucrat that was an intermediary for the community. As I showed that video of the doctor, right? She's a wonderful asset for the public health institutions in Mexico and for her own community. And I think that there is a realization, there is this kind of turn towards multiculturalism and towards, actually, in fact, recently, indigenous languages in Mexico were finally recognized as official formal languages along with Spanish. And so these things are changing, and I think our students, it's important for them to see hope and to see that, that they do have peers that are opening those spaces. So it's important to support them along the way. I see in the chat, there's a couple of questions. How much financial support does each student need each year? Well, the need is an interesting factor, and that's something that we've been trying to actually quantify a little bit more. We've been trying to, this last year, we developed, I think what's a pretty good questionnaire to get a sense of what are student expenses and what are students' income, to see where it is that we can support, because some of the scholarships that are out there are only to specifically help cover tuition. And what our scholarship does is that it's discretionary. And so they're able to use it for things that usually they wouldn't get support for, or they'd have to work an extra job in order to cover. But we are currently giving them 6,000 pesos a year, which is about $300 US dollars. And this past year, we were able to give a little bit of a discretionary extra to a couple of students who were particularly in need. So here we're talking a single mom, right? Or one of our students who has to do several trips to Guadalajara for eye treatment So, you know, we were able to do a little bit of that flexible kind of support, but for the most part, you know, we do see that there's a need for more. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Brian, because you've looked at their income and expense reports.
Yeah, we're still in the early stages of learning how our students cope with their economic circumstances as they maintain both a life in their home communities and a life in an urban center where they're attending a university of some kind. And unfortunately, unlike the United States and Canada, there isn't as much research or as much statistical information available about the circumstances of university students, Indigenous or otherwise. So we're having to gather that information as we go along and try to learn as much as we can by asking our students questions about their lives, their experiences, the barriers that they face, so that we can try to tweak the scholarship program and provide the support in the best way possible. So one of the things we discovered just this past year, for example, when we started to ask them detailed questions about the income that they get annually and their overall expenditures annually, we discovered that we had a wide range of students in terms of their annual income. So we had a number of students who had astonishingly low incomes, which meant that they were required as a precondition for survival in university to work very long hours. And of course, that's not very compatible with study, particularly when you're studying in a second language and in what is, for all intents and purposes, almost a foreign country, a different cultural context. So our students often need more time for their studies than other students, and yet some of them are so desperately poor that they're having to work long hours. So in cases like that, being able to top up the regular scholarship that we were giving students, we think is going to make a big difference for them. But we will get the details when we survey them again in the spring. So as it stands at the moment, we're trying to be in regular contact with the students, not only so that we can support them properly, but so that we can learn what we need to know to improve the scholarship program as we go along.
And Brian, this last year there was a lot of nurses, right? We had a lot of nurses and they had to buy their own supplies, right? It's not like the US where they give you, you know, all the PPE you need to be a nurse. So that's one of the things that they utilized the monies for as well, is to buy just the proper attire to be able to study, right? The nursing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering how fundraising is going this year, whereas we aren't in Mexico, we're here. How has that compared to other years? Are we keeping up? Are we growing? Are we falling far behind?
You want to take that, Diana, or do you want me to?
I think you should. I think we've definitely had some really wonderful, we've had donations, you know, and we've had some new people and we've had some continuing, but I'm not sure if it's going better or the same.
Well, the short answer is it's going better because we have a broader range of people making donations. And in some cases, we've now had people who've donated twice or even 3 times. So that's terrific. The difficulty, we have 2 major difficulties. The first is that we don't really know how many students there are out there who are potential recipients. So every year we average about 18 to 20 applicants, something like that. And most years we've been able to add 5, 6, 7, 8 new applicants. So that means a half to 2/3 every year of our applicants are not getting funding from us. At the same time, as I said earlier on, we started the first year with 6 scholarship students. This year we had 16. So we've been expanding. We won't make the decisions, the final decision about how many students we can support next year until about June, May or June, in that period of time. So our fundraising for 2021-22, the academic year, will continue up until about June. And when we know how much money we have in the pot in June, we'll be able to determine how many students can we support next year. And also, and critically, we have to make sure that we have enough money in the pot so that we can sustain that support for more than 1 year. So at the moment, I would say, particularly because a greater proportion of our 16 students this year are going to graduate. So I think the number is we're going to be down to about 5 or 6 students after this year. So next year we'll be adding, most likely, a big number of students. But how big that number is depends upon how much money we're able to raise between now and June. So things are going well. The word is getting around. We have more supporters, more people on our email list, more people are reading our newsletter, more people are donating, and we want to just keep that process going.
Yeah.
There's a question in the chat. It says, how do you see the future ramifications on the traditional cultural practices of the Wixarika community as certain students get a Western education? How do you see the contrast of these two systems affecting the traditional practices that have been passed down for hundreds of years? Good question. Go ahead, Elena.
Yeah, I mean, actually, that's what gives me hope. I think that oftentimes there's a great fear, right, that a Western education is going to displace them or further, take people away from learning their language. And as we can see, one of our scholarship recipients right now, we've supported him for 2 years, Dagoberto. All of his work is around linguistics and around creating programming to really address the communities in Nayarit. The communities that have most lost their language are actually the ones in Nayarit, right? And so he's been doing a lot of work with some of my greatest, most respected colleagues like Tutupica Carrillo to do creative work around bringing in both language and culture, understanding that, for example, with language, you can also fortify culinary traditions that have been also marginalized, right? One of the problems that we need to fight against is diabetes, and it has a lot to do with changing diet. And so a lot of these young people really see those connections. I think in this last round of student applications, we had so many that really tried to create, emphasize that link, right? We have another student who's now also studying forestry and ecology, and what he wants to do is find ways to really support programs that have already been in existence, but that haven't fully been able to consolidate. And so I do think that there's a lot of hope. Although there's fear, right? There's fear that there's an understanding that the more you dedicate yourself to the Western education and those degrees, you're not being able to necessarily always, because of the school calendar not working with the traditional calendar, you're not able to necessarily go to certain assemblies, community assemblies or ceremonies. And so that is something that students think about, right? That is something that some of the elders think as they see that that there are fewer people to pass on those, like the shamanic traditions, right? The curing and the healing that the Wixarika are so well known for. It's actually hard to find young people that are able to dedicate that amount of time and sacrifice, because it's actually expensive to become to do all the ceremonies, to hunt the deer, to throw the ceremonies for the whole community. That requires resources. So that is something that students think about, though. And I'm happy to say that we've also been able to support some great online gatherings. In September, we did that, and we were able to get a whole panel of young women to talk about these things, everything from territory to education and culture. So it is on their mind, but it's not easy. So that's a great question. I don't know if Maria has anything to add.
I just wanted to say that most of our students that have received the scholarship all want to give back to the community or bring back whatever it is that they're learning to the community. I saw that in a lot of the essays is what they said. So that's hopeful too, right? A lot of them are going to come back and share what they've learned and help their communities in any way they can.
Can I ask Diana or Maria, if to help students make the transition to more of an urban setting for their education, do the universities support them with a type of program? Native Student Services, for example. I remember in Canada, we had Native Student Services in our university to help kids that do live in smaller communities make the transition and complete their education in a good way. Is there anything like that?
Yeah. So actually one of the ways we've gotten the word out is through those types of student campus-based organizations that were created by mostly by the generation of students who were studying in the early 2000s. They were able to put into place at their, in some cases, both private and public universities, both kind of Indigenous student affairs programs that help with recruitment and retention of students. But also they, like at the ITESO, which is the Jesuit University in Guadalajara, we have several students that have gone through there. They have a program that provides both academic resources, but also a space for them to do cultural programming for the rest of the campus community. But not all of the universities have that. So it really is case by case.
Okay.
Maria?
I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah. What's the state of the Wixarika language? Is there a total bilingualism when the students might move into in the urban areas? Are the kids raised bilingual, or is there a drift towards loss of the language? And is there anything to read in the communities? Is there a periodical or something that they become readers as well as speakers?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's one of the things that's happened, and we do have a lot of students that we've supported that are in the field of education, is that they really are trying to push forward like more autonomous community, intercultural schools, right? That have more, obviously that have the materials in their native language, that require them to write in their native language, but also the materials, the curriculum is relevant, right? And again, I think it's a lot of these young people that are making sure that they're becoming the teachers, that they're helping create the school materials. But as I mentioned a few minutes ago, in Nayarit, there are definitely more communities there where there's been language loss. And so in those cases, we're talking more like language revitalization programs. And that's a little bit distinct. And I think it requires like a different curriculum and strategy. And a lot of it has to do, you know, it's language loss, like it's, you know, you might not see people wear as much the traditional clothing, and again, food. And it has to do with like the history, and in some cases, these are communities that were already displaced. So it's a different environment in which these younger people are growing up.
Yeah, I think your mom said, Yvonne said that they do learn Spanish in elementary, right? In the Sierra, and some Wahukia for sure, but also speak their language in those spaces.
Darlene has a question. If most students attend university in Mexico, are they able to attend in the USA or Canada, recognizing, of course, the challenges around immigration and perhaps higher cost? No, most are in Mexico. Every now and then, you know, there are, I've known of a couple who study abroad, but usually it's just like for an exchange, right? Not to do their full 4-year program. A lot of that has to do with language. I've actually had some people try to recruit but usually linguistic issues are kind of real, right? Because they wouldn't be able to do all that coursework in English. But we, like Isaias, who's going to be speaking with us on February 19th, he did an exchange program in the United States with members of other tribal nations, and that was really an amazing experience for him. Most people want to stay home, you know.
It's Chris Snyder. It's Chris Snyder. I wondered if I could just say a few words. I have to sign off in a couple of minutes, but I'm the founding chair and current chair of an organization in Canada called HIP, which stands for Honoring Indigenous Peoples. It's a partnership between Rotary and Indigenous people. We have a coast-to-coast board of 20 people, half of whom are Indigenous, half of whom are Rotarian, and half of whom are women. And our focus is education, awareness, and building of relationships. Our vision is to connect every Rotary Club in Canada, which there's 720, with an Indigenous community. And actually, I noticed that Tim Thompson, who's one of our Indigenous board members, is also on. As a matter of fact, it was Tim that brought this organization to our attention, and thus the conversation we had with Brian. We were exploring ways that we could perhaps get Rotary in Canada involved, perhaps through HIP and or one of the other clubs. It certainly fits within our mandate in general. However, our mandate with CRA is only good for Canada. That doesn't mean to say we can't liaise with groups such as yours, but I don't think we're going to be in a position to give tax deductions to people making donations. That being said, there are ways around. I don't want to complicate your lives with how convoluted it can be, but it's not impossible, and we're exploring ways that we can facilitate that. We also plan to talk to the Rotary Club in Puerto Vallarta. I understand they have said that it's outside of our area. If we could talk them into making an exception, that could make things quite simple, so that a Rotary Club could deal directly, say from Saskatoon or from Vancouver or Montreal or wherever, with the Rotary Club here, and they in turn could work with you. Anyway, we're working on it. I just thought I'd let you know of some of the things that we're doing. I noticed somebody else is on from Canada, from Saskatoon. It's 36 below. I'm just north of Toronto, about 2 hours, and it's about -5. So it's not that cold all the way across Canada. But anyway, the last thing I'll say, it's really, I'll use the word fascinating. That's really not the appropriate word, but how similar the Indigenous issues are all around the world. We do deal with people in Australia, and they in turn with New Zealand and Fiji, and also some of the Americans. And it's a similar story right around the world. So we're very much in tune with what's being done. I don't think we directly can facilitate a tax receipt, but we will try to move things along in one way to help some of the Indigenous people in Mexico, and particularly in the Puerto Vallarta area. I've been there 3 times to Puerto Vallarta, and I don't know whether to turn off the picture with the sunset and the palm trees in the background. That's where I'd love to be right now. Anyway, nice to be on, and good luck. It's good work. If there's one thing that's a leveler in this world, it's education, and I think we're all on that track. So, thank you, gracias.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Wow. You know, the Rotary Club supported me as an undergraduate, so I have to say thanks, because I was able to eat and buy certain things as an undergraduate. So I thank the Rotary Club all around the world for that.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Well, bienvenido.
And maybe I can just add that we are delighted to already get support from Rotary Sur in Vallarta, and we look forward to working with Rotary HIP in various ways to try to expand and strengthen the Huichol Scholarship Fund. So thanks a lot, Chris.
Well, you're welcome. If you want to explore some of the things that we're doing, just write on Rotary HIP and it'll come up one way or the other. We've got quite an extensive website.
Great. Well, I think we're done. I think for the day, I wanted to just invite you all once again to in 2 weeks from now at the same time with the link that Brian has in the email that he sent to you all. We're going to be hosting 2 of our scholarship recipients. So I hope that you all can join us or invite other people who might be interested. This is being recorded. We'll upload it to our YouTube, Huichol Research YouTube channel, so that you can also share it with people. Certainly, we really hope to see this grow. We really hope to be able to support in a more sustainable way. And thank you so much for just making time today. I'm really happy to see this turnout. And I'll teach you all one word in Wixarika, if you don't already know it, which is pamparius. Pamparius or pampariutsi, which is thank you. So pamparius, thank you for all of your support.
Thank you, Pampares.